This video contains spoilers for Final Fantasy XVI and the Rising Tide DLC. Final Fantasy XVI is awesome in spite of its numerous shortcomings. For that precise reason, I was excited when 2 DLC chapters were announced. It was an opportunity to address some of those flaws, maybe shine a light on underdeveloped characters like Jill or Benedicta, or even bring much needed variety to the gameplay via new playable characters. I think we were all dreaming of playing through Cid's backstory, for example. Unfortunately, that's not what we got. Instead, Echoes of the Fallen and The Rising Tide are more of the same. They're solid additions to the game. The Rising Tide in particular is beautiful, thrilling, and surprising. If you loved the base game, you'll most likely love this additional content. But these aren't must-plays. From the narrative to the characters and the gameplay, nothing here becomes necessary to the Final Fantasy XVI experience. That doesn't mean that there isn't a lot to like about this new adventure though, starting with its setting. Clive and his companions voyage north to Mysidia, where the lush green jungle, crystal clear waters, and stunning scenery provide a welcome change of pace from the gloomy skies that cover the rest of Valisthea. Art direction has always been among Creative Business Unit 3's great strengths. 14 and 16 alike feature some of the most striking vistas in all of Final Fantasy, and The Rising Tide does not disappoint in this regard. Both the tidal wave frozen in time and the magical mountaintop temple are so visually spectacular that I was instantly drawn in, excited to explore those locations and learn more about them. Masayoshi Soken's sublime soundtrack is the cherry on top. In addition to his trademark banger battle themes, there are some wonderfully soothing environmental tracks that accentuate the beauty of the world as you venture through it. In terms of level design, this DLC follows a familiar blueprint. It's a series of arenas connected by linear corridors. Now, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with linear level design in RPGs. Both FF10 and 7 Remake implement that style well. However, if you're going to be so straightforward, you need something to provide variety. Puzzles, minigames, anything to mix up the rhythm. 16's world is gorgeous, but it suffers from a look but don't touch approach. Be it through more dynamic traversal or destructible elements in the environment, the game would benefit from greater interactivity. Even some simple platforming would be a nice way to spice up an otherwise very homogeneous gameplay experience, but unfortunately the jump button is useless outside of battle. Combat is really the only thing 16 has to offer in terms of interesting gameplay, so thankfully the Rising Tide makes cool additions to an already strong system. The first of 2 new icon ability sets is Leviathan, which feels totally distinct from the rest of Clive's arsenal thanks to its focus on ranged attacks. A Mega Man style arm cannon lets you shoot water at enemies, allowing for excellent crowd control while rapidly eating through their stagger gauges. When this mode is active, Clive can also dodge twice in quick succession, granting him incredible mobility. Leaping across the screen to stay out of the enemy's attack range while hammering them with jets of water feels amazing. It's honestly pretty overpowered. Most enemies won't be able to lay a finger on you, but sometimes it's fun to just bully a pack of monsters. I particularly enjoy using Crosswell to gather together a group of Tonberries before annihilating them all with a concentrated blast. On the other hand, the Rising Tide's bosses put up more of a fight than anything the base game had to offer. The Timekeeper, for example, is a frantic encounter that tests your timing with that new double dodge. It's a cool fight, but the star of the show is of course the epic showdown between Ifrit and Leviathan. One aspect that makes 16's bosses so dynamic are the FF14 style mechanics that stack on top of each other in increasingly complex ways. Leviathan has a broad moveset, so recognizing what he's about to hit you with and responding accordingly can be tricky. But for that reason, successfully avoiding these various attacks in succession feels incredible. The most challenging part of the battle though is the extremely tight DPS check. You have to break through Leviathan's shield within a certain time frame or face instant death. It took me probably 5 or 6 times before finally nailing it. Not making the most of Ifrit's cooldown abilities or even missing a few combos is all it takes to fall short. It borders on frustrating, but in the end I appreciate that the game pushes back and forces you to get close to perfection in order to clear the battle. Having to overcome what might sometimes feel like an unfair challenge makes the encounter more epic. And while I don't think it rivals the incredible spectacle of the Clash with Titan, or the emotional catharsis of Ifrit and Phoenix joining forces to face off against Bahamut. It's still very cool and the highlight of this DLC. While the action is thrilling, the Rising Tide's narrative is disappointingly shallow. Like Echoes of the Fallen, it's essentially an extended side quest bolted onto the base game's story, becoming available just before Clive and the crew embark for the final battle. There's some interesting lore here, but ultimately this story feels ancillary and frankly unnecessary. Nothing here is truly important to the narrative of Final Fantasy XVI. The best DLCs, or at least my personal favorites, enrich their worlds, stories, and characters so much that they become crucial parts of the overall experience. When I replay FF7 Remake, for example, I always replay the Yuffie-centric episode Intermission, and whenever I get around to replaying God of War Ragnarok, I will absolutely revisit the excellent Valhalla expansion. Those have something that the Rising Tide sorely lacks: emotional impact. Characters are the heart of any great Final Fantasy story. They're what pull you in and make you care about the plot. Unfortunately, the character work here is weak. The only new character of note is Shula, and she's fine, I guess. Her determination to right the wrongs committed by her ancestors is admirable, but there's little to her beyond that. Clive is an awesome protagonist, but we don't see anything from him here that we didn't already see in the main game. He's joined by Jill and Joshua, but they're mostly just there to hang out. Jill in particular is a big missed opportunity. She's from the north, so this expedition represents something of a homecoming for her. This could have been the moment to explore her more deeply as a character, giving her a chance to reflect on her past and step into the spotlight. However, she's largely just a bystander here, like she is throughout most of the base game. The Rising Tide isn't a story driven by characters. More than anything, it feels like a conceit to create another icon battle. And again, it's a sick battle, but that alone isn't enough. There is one very cool surprise. Upon completing the story, you gain access to a new mode called Kairos Gate. I guess it's not technically a roguelike, because the enemy configurations are always the same, and there are no procedurally generated elements, but it's definitely inspired by that type of experience. Kairos Gate presents 20 floors of combat challenges. In between each stage, you can use the points you accrue in battle to unlock upgrades, some of which endure only a floor or two, while others remain until the end of your run. Although there are exceptions, I'm thinking of God of War Ragnarok Valhalla again, I'm not typically a huge fan of roguelikes. I get burnt out, frustrated, and lose patience every time I have to restart and grind through all the stuff I've already cleared just to get back to the part where I died. That said, this mode is a ton of fun. In contrast to the way too easy base game, it provides a nice challenge, and the coolest part of all is that it unlocks a second new icon, Ultima. Clive already felt amazing to play, but he's never felt more godlike than when he sprouts wings to glide across the battlefield and pulverize enemies with waves of radiant energy. Beyond chasing high scores, I don't think this mode has much replay value after you've cleared it. Even so, CBU3 didn't have to put in the effort to add this mode or create another icon for us to play with, so Kairos Gate is a welcome surprise. With all that in mind, the Rising Tide is a decent addition to FF16. I played through the story twice and cleared Kairos Gate, and I had a lot of fun doing it. The new icon abilities are sick, the music is excellent, and the bosses are spectacular. But while it's a pleasure to play, the lack of compelling characters, or any kind of emotional resonance, renders its narrative forgettable. Maybe I'm being ungrateful. They didn't have to make any additional content for this game at all. But if you're gonna do it, I say do it right. And unfortunately, the Rising Tide fails to add anything truly memorable to the world of Final Fantasy XVI.